Hi, welcome back. So in the last video, we more or less finished with all the things that we are going to learn specifically for CSS. And of course, we are going to learn much more in much more detail as we progress with some projects, which we're going to start in the next video too. But before we move on to that, I just wanted to cover some broken parts of CSS that have been left out until now. Like you already know most of those properties and you already know how you do those things, but I'm just going to show you some better ways to do things, right? So what do I mean by that? Let's just start. So the first thing that I'm thinking of covering is this EM and REM, right? So EM and REM are basically two units of measurement, just like the pixels. So, you could use pixels and EMs and REMs interreplaceably. That's completely fine, except they have some advantages over pixels, right? And so, you could use pixels in a normal site and, it wouldn't make a difference in something like this. Or, if we open up this file, I have to do this. Yeah, so if I open up this file, using pixels or using EMs would not make a very big difference, right? But yeah, but the thing is that pixels is absolutely, absolute value. Like if you've set 30 pixels, it will remain 30 pixels no matter what happens. Now, you might not have a problem with that in a normal browser, but we know that browsers give us an option of changing our default size, right, on any site. And this is not related to web development. If you are a general user using a computer, you can change your font size on your browser without any problem. Every browser gives you that setting. So imagine that the normal font size is 16 pixels and you've built everything according to that. But the user who is using your website has set his font size to be 22 pixels by default, but you have set everything in pixels. So him changing the font size will not have any effect on your website because you have set everything to absolute value of 30 pixels, let's say. So it doesn't matter what the root size of your browser is. So that is a kind of thing where you can have a problem with pixels. And yeah, so what you can do in that case is you can use a EM or an REM. So let's first see what an EM is. So if I do something like I'll do it to font size. Now you can do it to anything and that's never a problem. But let's say I'm giving a paragraph. These are some things that I did, so you can ignore them for now. So now let's say I'm giving this a font size. So this is how you give a size to your font, that's evident. And let's say I did this 30 pixels, right? Or I did this 32 pixels. And if I refresh, I see I get a size something like this, right? And this is overlapping, ignore that for the moment. And yeah, so we have something like this. And even if our font size for the browser were different, this would remain to be 32 pixels. However, if I make this 2em and I refresh, I see my size does not change. It still looks the same, really ugly. But if now the default size of the browser was something other than what I have in mind, then this would get adjusted accordingly. And why is that? That what 2em means is that I want my font size of the paragraphs to be twice of the font size of its immediate parent, right? So do you see what that is? I hope that makes sense because we're gonna use EMs and REMs a lot, and I'll get to REM in just a second. So again, EM is basically if you're giving a font size or a width, you could give anything that you give in pixels in EMs too. They are interreplaceable. So what 2EMs would mean is that you are giving what XEMs would mean if X is any integer, that you are giving a size of x times the size of its immediate parent to that particular element, right? So I'll do 2 and that makes sense. Yeah. So now the next thing is REM, and REM is actually pretty similar to EM, except EM XEM would mean that you are taking size of x times of its immediate parent. So if a paragraph is inside of a div, then 2em would mean 2 times the size of the div, right? But if you do something like rem, then everything would get 2 times the size of the main root element, which is HTML, right? So rem is basically what you would use in a condition like, the one we were talking about earlier for different browser sizes, because you are basically, by changing the browser size, you're changing the size of the HTML element, and then using 2rem would just link everything together with that particular element, right? And another use is in something known as media queries. You could use media queries to, say that, okay, between this width and this width, or between this size and this size of the window, apply these styles, otherwise don't apply them. So this is something that media query is, but you don't know what that is right now exactly, right? You don't know syntax and all. So I'll just leave that out for now, and when we get to that, we'll see how EM and REM can be useful, right? So that was about EM and REM. So first of all, there were some things happening in this, like everything going over each other first, and that was because of something that I was trying earlier on in this, but I decided not to do that. So you can ignore that, and you can just focus on the things that I'm telling you here, right? Don't I've removed all those things now, I think, but still, if there's anything that you don't have on your webpage, don't worry. Everything will work fine, even with what we made in the last video, right? So that's fine. And now what we're gonna see is the margin. And for the margin, now you already know how the margin works. You could do something like margin 10 pixels on the paragraphs, and if you refresh, I see we get a 10 pixel margin on all the sides of the paragraph. If this is properly visible in screencast, I see 10 pixels, 10 pixels, and there's 10 pixels above and below this, okay, right? So, but this is only when you want to set a equal margin on all the sides. Now imagine, okay, the first thing that I want to show you is a margin auto, right? And okay, the margin auto will make more sense once we know what the width and height, how we set the width and height. So you can leave that for now. So now I want to show you some other ways of putting the margin, and for that I'll go in and search margin in CSS, and I'll go to an excellent resource known as W3 Schools. You might refer to this a lot, along with Stack Overflow and things like that. So here we've got the different ways of setting a margin. So the first one is setting all of them differently, which is obviously quite brute force approach. You could do that, this isn't a problem. You could do something like margin top, and you could do margin, I mean, you will have values there, I'm just leaving it blank for now. And you can do a margin left, and you can do a margin right. This will work, there's no problem in this, except there are some ways to actually write this in less amount of lines, easier to write. Okay, so yeah, the first one is this. So how you can set all the 4 at once is you can do a margin, then let's take their example 25px, 50px, 75px, 100px, right? And let's apply this once and see what happens. So now we've applied this to paragraphs, and if I inspect this, yeah, so if I go to this computed, right, I see and it's better if you have this code with you here. So if we compare the margins, right, we have 25 pixels margin on the top, which is this. Then 50 pixels comes on the right, 75 comes on the bottom, and 100 pixels comes on the left. So we see that once we write 4 values like this, they go like from the top in a clockwise direction, from the top in a clockwise direction, and these 4 values are assigned to the 4 sides respectively. So this is one way you could set the margin, and the other way you can use a lot is this one. If you give it 2 values, let's say we had only this, right? So what do you mean by 2 values? And now if I refresh, I see my top and bottom get 25 and my left and right get 50. So when we have 2 values, the first value gets assigned to the top and bottom, and the second value gets assigned to the left and right. And that is another way that you will use a lot, right? So these are the 3 ways that you'll actually put good margins on, a lot of elements on your page. Especially this one. This is used a lot because at many points you might want to keep 0 margin on the top and bottom, and you might want to center your element or whatever it is on the page. And center is also done through something known as margin auto. We'll see that in this video. So that's something for the margin, right? And now what I want to show you is height and width. Yeah, so I mean, they're pretty evident what they are. They are the height and width of a thing, and this will be better shown if I have a good amount of space here. And I'll remove this 2 rem. This is making it too big. Right. So now what if I don't want this paragraph in this complete thing, right? What I can do is I can give it a width of, let's say, 500 pixels. And if I refresh, I see this gets restricted to a very small area, right? So that is something that you could get easily by doing a width. And again, width could be in anything: pixels, EMs, REMs, or percentage. And percentage is something that we'll use when we're making the code along that starts in the next video. And it is actually really helpful in making something responsive, which again we'll see in the next video. So yeah, width, and you can do a height. Again, let's say 500 pixels. And we get a height of 500 pixels. This border is surrounding the paragraph, and no matter how much content we have, the height of the paragraph will be 500 pixels, right? So now the last thing that I want to show you is margin auto. And I said you'll understand this when we have studied the width. So the use of margin auto, you will see as soon as I refresh this. Everything gets moved to the center. So what margin auto does is it horizontally aligns your, whatever element you've applied this on. And no matter how small your screen size is, the margin and on the left and the right will always be the same. Now this is a problem because we've set the width to be 500 pixels, which is not being covered in this screen size, but that's not a problem for this basic stage. So we see that this is centered on the page, right? This is how this goes, and no matter what happens. And this is because margin auto automatically puts an equal margin on both the sides by studying the width of the page by itself. You don't have to do anything after this. So margin auto is a really, really useful property for margin, and we're gonna use it a lot to center our things on the page, our divs on the page. So that are all the broken things that I wanted to show you. And now from the next video, we can start doing a small code along to make a decent looking site. And I'll see you then.